Hold on one sec. Okay, and you should see my Max Scholar page come up in a minute. I'm gonna try and make it fit nicely here. Okay, so I'm going to log into my account. And the first thing that I wanted to show you before I actually get into MaxWord itself is where to get that lesson plan that I just mentioned. As you know, you have your material section. Everyone that has access to the dashboard has access to the material section. That includes if you happen to give access to your parents, to your students' parents, they will have access to the materials as well. That's useful information to have, especially in situations like the one that we're living in now where the students are from home. There's a lot of resources and worksheets and materials that you or the parents can access to work with the student at home. So I'll go ahead and click on materials. We're talking about MaxWords today. And on any section that you go into from the materials, there's going to be multiple things. What I'm focusing on today are the first two files that I can find under the MaxWords section. I'll open actually the second one first to show you what it is. Here we go. So this is the basic template of the lesson plan that I would use for, again, any module in MaxWords. MaxWords has 5 different modules, each of those modules with different sections, different lessons, different types and amounts of exercises that I'll go through my student account. But if I'm building a lesson plan that I'll use to be able to do also direct instruction, this is the template that I would use for any of those 5 modules. So there's going to be at least 7 steps involved. We'll go over them in a second. Here, I also added additional exercises that you might want to add. So like I said, it's a minimum of 7, but you can add more. You'll adapt it based on what you're covering or your students' needs or their skills. And then if we keep scrolling down, we'll have an empty template of what that lesson plan would look like when it's empty, when I'm building it for my students. This would be my script for the lesson. And then on the last few pages, you'll see a sample of what that lesson plan would look like in the case of me covering the vowel T's. So you'll see that all the boxes that were empty on the pages that I was just scrolling through are now filled in. And again, I'll use another example to really go step by step. I just wanted to show you what this second file on the list is. And then I'll open the first one on the list. That is pretty much the same template, but just the part of the empty template, meaning without the steps and without the information already filled in. So this is what I would use to build my own lesson plan once I'm ready to start writing it. So I'm going to leave this one open. And I'm going to go back to my account. And I'll click the Go to My Max button on the top right-hand side of my screen. As you know, everyone that has a teacher account, even a principal or administrator account, has access to the dashboard, but also you can view the student site through your own account. In order to do that, you click on Go to My Max. That switches you over to the student side of things. And there you have access to all the levels, all the programs, all the lessons. Just as a quick reminder, remember your students might not have access to all of this, all of the icons, I mean, that I have on the screen. That's predetermined by their grade or by the settings that are adjusted in each of their accounts or on your classes or groups accounts. you have access to everything at all times. Nobody can adjust your settings, but your students might not have access to it all. For example, students in kindergarten through 2nd grade wouldn't even have max words on their screen, or max music or vocab or places or bios. K through 2 only has these 2 buttons. 3rd grade and up does have max words, which is our focus today. And remember that you can always edit the settings, and if you do want your students to access certain things, you can make it so. For now, let's just focus on the 5 modules that max words will give your students. The modules are kind of organized in order of difficulty. So Clover would be the more simple type of skills. Then I would move on to spelling rules, then prefixes and suffixes, then Latin roots, and then Greek roots. So let's go ahead and start with Clover. In Clover, what I'll learn about is syllabication and how to identify different syllable types. So I'll just do a quick run through what each of those syllable types looks like. First is the C, which stands for closed syllables. Those are syllables that have a short vowel sound in them, and that vowel is surrounded by consonants. Then I have the L, which stands for consonant LE type of syllables. Those are syllables that are at the end of words and end with a consonant and then the letters LE. For example, apple, table. Then I have the O, which stands for open syllables. Open syllables end in a vowel, which is long. As you know, long vowels say their own name. So for example, the word open has an open syllable. And I'll go into one of these to just show you an example. But again, what I want to do is do a quick run through all the sections in the modules of max words. So we have so far closed syllables, consonant LE, and open syllables. Then we get to V, that is vowel teams. And in vowel teams, I'll go over a lot. I want to say it's 35 groups of sounds that I need to learn. For example, the OU or OO, which makes in and of itself multiple different sounds. So in this section specifically, it's more of a matter of exposure to different vowel combinations and the sounds that they make. There's no real rule to learn when it comes to vowel teams. It's just a matter of exposure to as many sounds and as many words with those sounds as possible. Now I'll go back to Clover. We get to the letter E. That stands for vowel consonant E or silent E, sneaky E, magic E. It's called different ways depending on where you're from. But it's all referring to the same syllable type or the same sound, which is that final E in a word that is silent. And then we have the R, which stands for R-controlled syllables. That is when the R is standing next to a vowel and it affects the sound that that vowel makes. It's not going to be a short vowel sound. It's not going to be a long vowel sound. It's a particular sound that is done whenever the vowel is standing next to the R. So as you can see, every letter in the word clover stands for a different type of syllable. It's just easy to remember, clover. And again, that's closed, consonant LE, open, vowel teams, silent E, and R control. I'm going to go, for example, to the consonant LE. I'm going to click Start Now. And that's going to take me to the introduction. Like we were talking about before, the consonant LE is a syllable that is at the end of a word, and I can identify it easily by just looking at the last letters of the word. If it ends in a consonant LE, I know that that's the type of syllable that I'm dealing with. And there's a few examples here on my screen. Students can click on those words to have them read out loud. And I'm just going to click OK, got it, to show you the exercises that are associated with this section. Here, like I said, we're going to learn about syllable types and syllable division rules. So here I know that when I'm dealing with a consonant LE type of syllable, I should split the word or separate it before the consonant that is before the LE. So in the word wrinkle, the consonant LE would be the KLE, and the split would be before the K, before that consonant that is right before the LE. I'll see different examples as well. Many times we just know how to split words into syllables by clapping them out. Here, you would actually be able to visualize why the split would be where it is. In this case, before the consonant, before the LE. So I have scramble, wrinkle, fiddle, circle. Then the student will have to do or complete their own exercises based on what they've seen so far. As they answer things correctly or incorrectly, they're going to get scores and corrections. See, I got this one wrong, but I know which one was the right answer now. And whatever I answer here, whatever scores I get on every section will be immediately entered into my report. So on the report, you'll be able to see what sections your students are working on and what scores they're getting along the way. Keep in mind that a good score should be above the 75% line, so that should be the goal. Now I kept moving on past that syllabication exercise, and I get to a fluency drill, similar to the one that we always bump into in the phonics program. There's a timer, I'll start it, and it's going to start counting down. The idea is that we want the students to read as many words as possible in those 60 seconds that are on the clock. Starting from the top left, and going first row, second row, third row, and so on. If I reach the last word, which would be here, whistle, if I reach the last word and I still have time on the clock, I'll start over from the top. So the exercise is to see how many words I can squeeze into that minute. Notice that there's a read aloud button, so that words can be read out loud for the student, but that would be pretty much the exercises for this section, and the other sections in Clover are pretty similar. The ones that are a little bit different are, for example, the V or the R sections, because they're, like I was saying before, it's not so much that I need to learn a rule, I just need to be exposed to different vowel teams or different R-controlled sounds. Now on my screen, I'm having the review number 1. There's 4 reviews overall in Clover. Each of them come after a certain amount of sections have been finished. So when I finish the first 2 sections, I get my first review. When I finish sections 3 and 4, I get my next review. And when I finish sections 5 and 6, I would get another review. And then when I finish all of them, meaning when I finish all of the sections for the CLOVER in Clover, I would get a final review with all of them. What those reviews have me do is it's a screen like this. It presents me with a list of words, and I need to choose whether each of those words are one syllable type or another. So usually it's 2 sections at a time, but when I get to that final review at the end of the entire module of Clover, I'm going to have all of the syllable types together, and I need to choose what syllable types I'm dealing with. So here I'll choose consonant LE, consonant LE. These are pretty easy to visually identify. I just look at the last few letters. Closed syllables, remember, will have short vowel sounds surrounded by consonants. And that's how I choose or categorize them. I'll get my results. And then I have another round to do. Keep in mind on every single screen of the software in general, towards the top right, there's this printer icon. So you can always print things out from the site and use them as worksheets. This could be a worksheet that you actually give to your students for them to check off the circles or color the circles on actual paper. I get my final score, and that would be my review score. And I will go back to the main screen of Clover. And you'll see how the scores will start appearing for the student as well. And these same scores will be accessible to you on the reports. So let me show you what I was saying about the vowel teams. That is not so much of a rule that I need to learn. as opposed to just exposure to different vowel teams and different sounds. So here's the sound, or the letter, sorry, AI, making the sound A as in main. And then I'll have different example words. I'll have fluency drills as well. And that's pretty much it. It's just a lot of different vowel teams to go over. Know that for next school year, when we come back in the fall, the Max Words program in general would have been revamped a little bit. Some visual things, but mostly there's going to be a lot more exercises, a lot more drill and practice for the students to do. As of right now, these are the types of drills or exercises that the student would encounter in the Clover section. But remember that I said there's the offline or direct lesson plan that you can write with the 7 steps that I was going over before. There's a visual drill where you present the, let's say, closed syllables to your students. There's words that you're going to use as examples, pretty much following what the software just walked me through. But this type of lesson plan, I'm delivering it. So this would be me as a teacher with the student explaining the syllable types, let's say, explaining the rules, having them participate with questions that I'm asking them. I'm asking them to spell words, do sound blending. Here I could keep count of the fluency scores, how many words they read on those fluency drills. And then I can dictate words, dictate sentences, and have them read max reading passage. So let me show you what this lesson plan might look like, or what my cards, remember every time that you see boxes, those mean index cards. So let me open up my webcam here to just briefly show you what my Clover cards look like. So this is my whole Clover section. And this would all be part of my visual drill cards. So all of these cards I use for step number 1 of that lesson plan. And I took the second one. Let me look for the closed syllables, actually. Here it is. So I have closed syllables. That's what I'm introducing. This would be box number 1 on my lesson plan. Then I have the definition of what is a closed syllable, or how to identify a closed syllable. And that's by knowing that there's a short vowel surrounded by consonants. For example, in the word pet, short vowel surrounded by consonants. Cat, short vowel surrounded by consonants. Lid, here I coded it, vowel, it's a short vowel, surrounded by consonants. That's a closed syllable. Catnip. If we look at this like that, you might have to, sorry, Sherry, I see that you wrote that you can't see my cards. You might have to click at the bottom of your screen. There's the zoom icon. You might have to play around with what you're looking at any given time. Let me see if I am, yeah, my webcam should be open. So if I see this half, I have short A surrounded by consonants, cat. Short I surrounded by consonants, nip. Now I start seeing multisyllabic words. In Max Words in general, I'll start seeing one-syllable words to introduce me to certain things. But in general, Max Words has to do with multisyllabic words and what parts make up those words. In this case, we're focusing on syllables. So catnip, that's 2 closed syllables next to each other. Now, when I have multisyllabic words, I'll also want to know or learn how to split this word into syllables. And there's a rule, usually. This is the rule, or my formula rather, for the closed syllables. This would be a short vowel sound surrounded by a consonant. This will be a short vowel sound surrounded by a consonant. So if I have the word catnip, where I have those vowels and those consonants, the division would be between the consonants. So in this case, it would be between cat, nip. If I clap it out, cat, nip. Same thing that I clapped out, but now I understand the visual. I understand the formula that I should follow. Same thing with napkin. Closed syllables surrounded, short vowels surrounded by consonants. Short vowels surrounded by consonants, that's a closed syllable, that's a closed syllable. When I have two closed syllables standing next to each other, I'll split between the consonants that are separating those vowels. Same thing with public. Short vowels surrounded by consonants. Short vowels surrounded by consonants. If I need to split, this is where I'll do it. Between the consonants, separating those vowels. Public. All of these, again, are all part of my visual drill. If you're looking at the Word document, the big cards are the ones that I use to explain things. The closed syllables are short vowels surrounded by consonants. The smaller boxes are all of my word cards that I'm flipping through right now. You can make as many as you want. I usually try making a lot so that I can show things like this, so that I can show things like that, where I already split it. Here I ask them where to split it and why. Here I can fold and play like that. Here, another type of card where I just write the word and code it. And again, I'll ask the students where to split it. In this case, remember, I split between the consonants that separate the vowels. So it would be velvet. Here, I would ask my students, why did I do the split there? Because you're looking for the consonants that are separating the vowels. Selfish. You get the idea. So I try to make as many cards as possible, as applicable. You can have your students make their own cards. That would be my visual cards for the closed syllable section, for just the C in Clover. And then I have my consonant LE, all of the other sections. Remember, the ones that will look a tad bit different are the V and the R. The V, it's because I'm just exposed to different sounds. So I have AY as in bay, so A. EI as in either, so E. EA as in team, so another E. Same sound, different spellings. So it is important to go over these, and when you get to the vowel teams, by the way, you're probably not going to do, not probably, you should not do all of the vowel team sounds in one lesson. You're probably going to have quite a few lessons, quite a few lesson plans for segments of the vowel teams. My suggestion is that you do a lesson plan for all the vowel teams that make the long A sound, another lesson for all the vowel teams that make the long E sound, and so on. That's going to make it easier to cover and not just overwhelm your students with these many sounds at the same time. So it's important that you make your cards, that you build your lesson plans, because you're going to have students that will need more reinforcement on the syllabication. There's students that are going to need more reinforcement on just the spelling of the vowel teams. So you're going to need to adapt this lesson, but you won't be able to adapt it unless you're actually writing it and trying to figure out how to best approach your students and the skills that you want to cover with them. So what I just pulled up is all my visual cards for step number 1. Now, if I keep scrolling down, I would have the auditory tactile drill, where students will trace the words that I tell them to trace. Trace can be with their finger on the desk. It can be with their finger tracing on a piece of construction paper, or they can actually write it down, write the words down if you prefer. Which words? Any of the words that I've introduced with this lesson. So if my lesson is for closed syllables, I'm going to dictate words that have closed syllables, and that's how my students will review or kind of practice the type of words or the type of sounds or the type of skill that we're covering in this lesson. Then we have the sound blending, which is pretty similar. We can use the same words, but this time the students are blending one syllable with the next. I'm not just tracing the word, I'm not just writing the word, I'm blending the sounds. Then we get to the fluency. Like I said on this section, let's say that I have my student Sarah, and she read 12 words per minute. And I have my student Joe, who read 15 words per minute. Remember that fluency is something that you constantly want to assess, and the computer is not going to assess it for you. When the students get to fluency screens in general, they're just practicing. They're just getting used to those words, getting used to reading against the clock. But the actual assessment of the fluency needs to be done with you, one-on-one, with each student. Then if I keep scrolling down, we'll get to the spelling. Again, similar to the exercises, the other exercises that are in this lesson, I'm going to dictate 10 words. I usually try to add more and more words with every step, which will also allow you to work on vocabulary. You can use new vocabulary words. Then we have the sentence dictation, or you can make this a sentence building exercise where you tell the students, okay, we've gone over certain words. Why don't you come up with your own original sentences? Or let's say that you come up with hard words, hard vocabulary words that follow the rule that you're going over. You can tell them, find the definition of that word in the dictionary and write a sentence. You can, again, adapt it, make it your own. And then for the reading, you can either have your students going to Max Reading to do a story there, answer the questions, write outlines and summaries, or you can also have them come up with their own story, or you can come up with a story to reinforce the words or the sounds or the rules that you're covering at any particular time. So that's how you can use this template with the basic steps and adapt it to whatever module in MaxWords that you're using. My example was for closed syllables. Now let's see how I would deal with the next module of MaxWords, which is spelling rules. I go back to MaxWords. This time I'll choose the second module here, which has 18 different spelling rules. I'll just scroll down a bit so you can see what type of rules are there. And I'll just do this one, let's say the GE and DGE, or the sound of J spelled either GE or DGE. So here what I'm learning is sort of like a condition. So my cards that I'm using on my lesson plan would look a little bit different. I would probably have two cards. One is, when do I use GE? Another one would be, when do I use DGE? I would have examples of each. That's what I'll use my smaller cards for. I'll give them examples of each spelling. I'll have them trace them. I'll have them blend the sounds. I'll have them read the fluency list that appears on the site. So again, same steps. What you're just going to change is what content you are covering on that particular lesson. So here, the content would be that I'll use DGE at the end of a word directly after a single short vowel. Or I'll use GE after a consonant or after a long vowel sound. There's examples, of course. Again, when the students click on the words, they can have them read out loud to them. And as they click OK next, or let's go, or move on, that's how they move through the different steps. Here I have the fluency. Remember, I'll start the timer to myself. I'm reading to myself. The computer is not recording me. This is for practice. Let's say every Monday or every Friday, I know that I have a mini session with my teacher. And for 1 minute, my teacher is just listening to me, reading words over and over and over again from this screen. At the end of that minute, I'm going to get a score. The score will be how many words I read correctly. And that is what you will enter on your lesson plan here. That would be your fluency score, or your students' fluency score, more correctly. Side note, pretty much everything that I've clicked through so far, whether it's fluency tables, whether it's this type of introduction page with how to use or when to use GE or DGE, even some exercises, all of those things you can print out one or of two ways. Option one, remember you have that printer icon here that you can use to print or download. I'll click on it, and here, if you have a printer, you can just go ahead and print it. If you want to download it instead of choosing a printer, choose Save as PDF, and that will save it to your computer. So that's option one. you can print anything directly from the site. Option 2, I'm going to go back to my dashboard where I initially took that lesson plan from. So here I'm on the materials, I'm in Next Words. The 2 documents that I initially pulled up are the first 2 on the list, these 2. And everything else is supporting materials. For example, you have samples of lesson plans that teachers have sent us in general. And then you have for each module, for example, all of these things are things to reinforce Clover. For example, the fluency words. You don't need to click your way around into the program like crazy in order to get to the fluency drill. Just download the fluency document from here, and you'll be able to go over all of the fluency exercises for Clover in this case. That's what I clicked into. There's going to be additional worksheets. There's going to be all these things that you can really use to reinforce or complement, supplement the lesson that you have online. So here, this would be the closed syllable words. These are the consonant LE words. My point is, take some time going over the materials for each of the programs that you're going to be using, because there's really a lot of resources for you to use there. On the top, or the first few options, are always going to be the basic templates that you'll need to use. Everything else is what to fill those templates with, pretty much. All the example words, all the passages that you can read. There's lesson tracking sheets as well. So for the rest of our time together today, I'm just going to focus on the software component and showing you a few more sample lessons, but always keep that in mind. You don't only have the software. You have a whole bank of resources on your teacher site under the materials section. So do spend some time going over them, building your own lessons, making them your own, because that's going to make it that much easier for you to deliver the lessons and for your students to really get all the skills that you're trying to teach them. So back to my student site. We saw the introduction, we saw the fluency. Here, when it comes to the spelling rules, there's going to be different types and different amounts of exercises. For example, here, I need to choose which words follow the rule, the GE or DGE rule. Sometimes I need to choose the words that do not follow the rule. So it is important that the students read the questions thoroughly, choose their answers, and they're going to be scored throughout. And again, this is where the scores will come from that are populating your reports for your students. When you pull up your reports of usage of data, this is where all this information is coming from. Another type of exercise here on this screen. Well, while it loads, it's going to be a list of words that are missing their ending. And I need to choose whether they end with GE or DGE based on what I learned from this rule. If you do, or you complement the online with the offline, remember I said I recommend that your students also make their own cards. So let's say that I'm on this screen and I forgot when I should use GE or DGE. I can have my cards in front of me and just look at them and use them as my own resource to choose that here I should use GE because it's following a consonant, or here I should use DGE because it's following a short vowel, for example. I'll go back to the main screen of spelling rules. And I'll just go into another one, for example, here, homonyms. And remember, my internet is extra slow. I did warn you guys from the beginning, but usually doesn't take more than a second or two to load. So here I see the definition of each spelling of there. And then I'll have exercises. In this case, it's going to be filling in or completing sentences with the proper there. If I'm talking about a place, if I'm talking about possession, and so on. I'm gonna let it load. Here we go. So here it's, yeah, fill in the blanks with the different options. Now I'll go back to Max Words. And if you haven't noticed, by the way, how I'm moving back and forth from the main screen of Max Words into particular modules, I'm gonna let the screen load. So I'll point you to the section of the screen that I've been using to move my way around. Okay, so if you see on the top left section of my screen, there's a little elephant, there's the word My Max, then there's the word Max Words, right? I'm going to click on the next module now, Prefixes and Suffixes. Now look on that top left-hand section again. I have the elephant and My Max, I have Max Words, and I have Prefixes and Suffixes. So that's kind of like a map of where I am and how I got there. If I want to go back, I can just click on Max Words, and that takes me to the main screen of Max Words. If I wanted to go back to My Max, I can just click on My Max, and that takes me back to the launching page. So always look on the top left-hand section, and you can move your way around a lot quicker than by just hitting the back button over and over and over again. So I'll do Prefixes and Suffixes now. And here, the exercises are pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but there's just a lot of prefixes and a lot of suffixes to go through. So what we did is we divided them into different groups or different subsections, if you will. I already did the first one. Notice that I got 100%, but on every section that I finish, I'm going to have the option to redo. Don't take the redo as like an order. You must redo it. No, it's just an option to do so. Maybe you moved on from the Latin numbers, but a month down the line, you want to go back and review it. You can just redo it. Maybe the student finished the section with a terrible score. They don't have to keep that terrible score. They can just go ahead and redo it and get a better score the second time around. The latest scores is the ones that we'll keep on the reports for them. And this is true for every section, by the way. Max Phonics, Max Reading, they can always go back and redo things. So here I'll just choose the group 1. For every one of these groups or every one of those sections, there's quite a few prefixes in it. And you'll see the origin, whether it's a Latin or Greek prefix, what the prefix means, examples. Again, every time that you see examples, you can click on them and have them read. And then the exercises, like I said, are pretty simple. It's just a matter of remembering what the prefixes mean, how they look like in different words, and then filling sentences that also will have some words that are taken out of the sentence, and I just need to fill in the blanks. Here, for example, I just need to drag and match the prefixes with their definitions, and I'll get a score. And then the next type of exercise, I can also move in between the exercises by clicking on the circles on the top. And here I would just need to drag the prefix into a word to complete that sentence. And again, there's supporting materials for this on the dashboard, on your material section, and you can print things out from here. You can tell the students, okay, finish the sentences on the screen and then come up with another sentence with an original sentence using those same words. You can take the basics that we give you and make it your own, expand it a lot. So prefixes and suffixes, that's how it's going to look like. And like I said, there's going to be multiple groups of prefixes, multiple groups of suffixes that the students need to go over. A common question that comes up from teachers is, how long does it take my students to go over all of Max Words? Do they need to finish it in one school year? Absolutely not. You'll also see when we get into Latin roots, for example, the vocabulary level increases significantly. I wouldn't have students below 5th or even 6th grade on the roots at all. Clover and spelling rules are a little bit easier, so you might want your 2nd graders, 3rd graders there. Prefixes and suffixes, I would probably leave for 3rd, 4th, 5th. And then Latin and Greek roots, definitely for 5th grade and above. We have high schoolers that are in this, middle school. These are sections that are crucial for spelling and for vocabulary, which usually middle schools and high schoolers struggle with. So it is important that they go over the entirety of Max Words as well. Doesn't matter their grades. These are skills that we're talking about, and it's very important spelling rules and skills that need to be learned regardless of the grade. So don't rush through it, because the software, you might go through it quickly because you know how to choose the right option out of the ones that you're given. That doesn't mean that if you ask the student what a closed syllable is face to face, they're going to know how to do it, right? So it is important to do the software. It is important to do the supplements with the offline lessons or the direct instruction, and take your time. Review things as many times as necessary. It is important not just to finish the program and not just to move through the sections. It's important to master things along the way. So the last section that I wanted to show you is a sample of Latin roots. Latin roots and Greek roots, they're pretty similar. So I'll just show you this one. In the meantime, while it loads, remember you can use the chat box to ask any questions. Here on the Latin roots, the content will also be divided into different groups or different sets in this case, each set with multiple roots to go over. And the beauty of this Max Words program in general, like I said, it's going to help me with multisyllabic words and with vocabulary. There might come a time, or there will be a time, where I bump into words as I'm reading that I've never seen before. It can be long words, hard words that I've never seen before. But if I'm able to at least identify the parts of those words that I do know, if I can split those words into syllables, if I can identify that there's a prefix and that prefix carries a meaning with it, and I can identify the root and that root carries a meaning with it, I may not know the word right off the bat, but if I can identify those little bits and pieces, I can kind of come up with the definition of a word. It'll make it easier for me to read it. So just by understanding all these rules and all these sections and the roots and the prefixes, just by going over that, I can expand my vocabulary by thousands of words. So here there's going to be 8 different roots on each section. So odd would be the first root. This, vid is considered one root because it comes from the same type of origin and it means the same things. So we'll see the roots, examples, and what they mean. If we go back to the lesson plan that I was talking about initially, I would do one lesson plan for each of those roots. So here, the front of my card would be the root odd. The back, it would be that it means to hear, as in the word auditory. So those would be my cards. Here I would put on my example cards auditorium. I would put audible and other words that I can come up with that have that root. So don't try to overachieve and put 8 roots on the same lesson. Your students will be confused. They won't be able to tell apart one meaning from the next. But if you do one lesson at a time, one root at a time, you really drill those definitions and those words into their heads. That's why I said it's not going to take you just a couple months to go over Max Words, because imagine how many lessons are involved in this. Now I'll click through a little bit so you see the types of exercises. Like I said, Latin and Greek roots are a little bit more advanced. You'll see that also reflected in the amount of exercises that are there. It's going to take students a little bit longer to go through these. And I do apologize for the speed of the internet. You'll see that when you open it on your computers, it loads a lot faster. So here, one of the exercises that I need to do is I'm given a word and I need to split it into syllables and come up with a definition. So here, I'm reinforcing things that I would have learned in Clover when I was learning the syllable division rule. And I'm using my knowledge of the prefixes and the roots to come up with a definition. Maybe I don't know what the word verdict is, but I do know what the root dict is. So I can come up with a pretty safe assumption as to what the definition might be. Then we have different exercises where I need to complete words. Sometimes I need to complete sentences. There's another exercise where there's going to be a text box and a few words that have been covered on this module or in this section specifically. And I need to write a paragraph using those words. Here you'll see different words. I have prefixes, I have suffixes using the same roots, different words, same root, and I need to fill in the sentences. So there's a lot of drill and practice involved, in addition to the drill and practice that you should add as it is through your lesson plans that you're writing and delivering face-to-face to your students, or in this case, online to your students. And while this loads, I'm gonna answer Brenda on the chat box. All of the boxes, writings, and sheets, are those found in the materials? Yes, they are. Everything that I've been pulling up that is not part of the software, I took from the material section. Here is that exercise that I was talking about with the text box and some words. I need to write a paragraph using these words, at least 5 of them. And then at the end, I'm going to have a fluency drill. You'll see the words here and you'll see what I mean by the level increases significantly. Take a look at the words here. It's, it's difficult vocabulary. I wouldn't put probably an elementary student in these, unless you know that your elementary kids are advanced and you want to put them there. Again, it's up to you. But another option of what you can do, let's say that you do want to go over roots with your 3rd graders, 4th graders, but these words are too hard. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna take your lesson plan and you're gonna make it your own. You're gonna use words that you know that they can deal with. Disregard the software. Don't give them access to that section of the software. Just come up with your own lesson and you deliver it, adapt it to the level that your students can deal with. Eventually challenge them and eventually have them do it on the software where they'll be exposed to new vocabulary words as well. So again, just a quick recap from what we saw today. Remember that when you first log in, you're gonna get to your dashboard. On your dashboard, you have your materials section and supporting materials for each of the core programs. The core programs are Max Phonics, Max Reading, and Max Words. That is where you want most of the time to be spent on. If your students are lower grades, you'll probably focus more attention on Max Phonics and Max Reading. If your students are higher grades, you'll probably pay more attention to Max Reading and Max Words. Here I clicked on Max Words. I opened up these first 2 files, sorry, not chapters, these first 2 files that have those sample lesson plans and the steps that I should follow. Remember that these lesson plans are used for any of the 5 Max Words modules, meaning I can use that same lesson for Clover, that same lesson plan for spelling rules, prefixes and suffixes, or Latin or Greek roots. And there's going to be additional supporting materials for each module. Just look at the beginning of the name of the file to know what that is associated with. But you have for each module some things at least to access there. In addition, remember that you can access your own account as a student or view it from a student's perspective by clicking on Go to MyMax. That doesn't mean that your students are doing the work there. Your students have their own usernames and passwords, and that's when they'll do the work. This is for you to either build your lessons or do guided instruction through your own account. So again, once you get to MyMax, you can access all of the programs, all of the levels, all of the modules, whether your students have access to that or not. You always have access to everything. So if you go to MaxWords, you can see all the different modules and all the lessons that are involved in each. That's pretty much what I wanted to show you. I see that there's another question. What does a typical small group lesson look like? Or what is the typical amount of time teachers allow? Well, it changes, obviously. It changes with the setup that you have. It changes if you're in a classroom or if you're just doing a Zoom lesson. It changes with how many students you have and what levels, plural, might be on the same group of students that you're dealing with. Usually, when you're doing small group instruction, we would be talking about groups of 5 students or so. And what I suggest, me personally, this doesn't mean you have to do it this way, but me personally, I like building the lesson plan first and doing the instruction through the lesson plan first to kind of get a taste for my students' levels, how they're dealing with the words that I chose to expose them to, how they're dealing with the spelling of the words, how they're dealing with me asking them to build sentences. And then I'll see if I need to do another lesson plan about the same skill. Or I'll see if actually they got the closed syllables pretty quickly, I can put them on the software. So it's really hard to tell time-wise because this is not divided by grade levels. This is skills that many students don't even go through. So it's hard to tell. We usually talk about 30-minute sessions, and within 30-minute session, you can cover one of your lesson plans, and maybe the next lesson I would do reinforcement, or maybe I would have them go on the software next lesson to see how they do independently. So always think about 30-minute sections, and don't go faster than what your students can. If you need to review the same thing 3 times, then you need to review the same thing 3 times. It is important, especially on any Orton-Gillingham-based program like Max Scholar is, to move on as I master things. If I didn't master this and I moved on to this, this is going to be shaky and this is going to be shaky. If I master this and I moved on to this and this is shaky, only this is shaky. This I master. So it is important to move on as I master and not just to try and rush through the program. That's why each student has their own account, because maybe I move on faster, but maybe for some other sections, I need to redo things over and over until I get it right. So just to kind of wrap things up, remember, Max Words in general or by default is only going to be accessible to grades 3 and up, all the way up to 12. Through your settings, you can adjust what specific modules you might want your students to access, even if they're in lower grades, K through 2. I personally don't recommend giving them the younger grades access because, as you saw, it's kind of concepts that they need to go over, maybe words that they've never been exposed to. So if you do want to cover certain things like vowel teams or silent E with your younger grades, I recommend doing it via direct lesson plan and then just wait until they get access to the actual Max Words to do so. So that's pretty much all I had for you guys today. Thank you for joining. I hope it was clear and it kind of gave you a little bit more insight as to what Max Words is and has to offer your students. Make sure that you go over things yourself. It's first a good review for us all, and also it'll help you understand what areas you want to focus on with your students, whether that is now or whether it is in the fall. I see other questions that have come up. I'm going to answer them individually through the chat or via email. And if you do have questions that come up, I'm going to go ahead and write my email here on the screen. So you can just shoot me an email with any questions that you have along the way. So this is the best email to reach me. It's agus.maxscholar@gmail.com. That's my name. Okay? I'm going to write it also on the chat box. And that's pretty much all I had for you. So thank you guys for attending. I'm just going to write my name and then I'll close it out. The recording will be sent out to you next week on Monday.